This is an excellent excerpt from a piece titled On the Psychology of a Conspiracy Denier, written by journalist Tim Foyle, in his article appearing in March of 2021. Why is it that otherwise perfectly intelligent, thoughtful, and rationally minded people balk at the suggestion that sociopaths are conspiring to manipulate and deceive them? And why will they defend their ill-founded position with such vehemence? We know that history catalogs the machinations and activity of liars, thieves, bullies, and narcissists, and their devastating actions and effects on the world and on people. In modern times, too, evidence of corruption and extraordinary deceptions abound. We know without question that politicians, for example, lie and hide their connections, and also that corporations and other organizations routinely display utter contempt for moral norms that we abide by. Corruption surrounds us. We know that revolving doors exist between corporate and political spheres, the lobbying system, corrupt regulators, the media, and the judiciary, and that this means that wrongdoing is practically never brought to any semblance of genuine justice on a large scale because of that revolving door. We know that the press and the media makes noise about these matters occasionally, but never really pursues them with true vigor or honesty. We know that in the intelligence services around the world and in law enforcement around the world, wrongdoing on a breathtaking scale is commonplace, and that again, justice is never forthcoming in the most important ways. We know that governments repeatedly ignore and trample on the rights of their people and actively abuse and mistreat the people that are part of their nations. None of this is controversial to any of us today, not to grown-ups anyway. So exactly what is it that conspiracy deniers refuse to acknowledge with such fervor, righteousness, and condescension? Why, against all of the available evidence, do they sneeringly and contemptuously defend the crumbling illusion that the great and the good are up there somewhere in the sky and have everything in hand? That they have only our best interest at heart and are scrupulous, wise, and sincere? That the press serves the people and truth rather than serving crooks that own them? That injustice after injustice result from mistakes and oversights according to the press, but never from that dread word, a conspiracy? What reasonable person would continue to inhabit such a fantasy world that does not exist? The point of disagreement here is only on the matter of scale. Someone who is genuinely curious about the plans of powerful sociopaths wouldn't reasonably limit the scope of their curiosity or their investigation, for example, to just one corporation or just one nation. Why would they limit it to that? Such a person assumes that the same patterns on display at one nation or in one locality or in one company or partnership or organization work their way up the entire power food chain. So what the denier is trying to stand for is really preposterous. The question is why do they do this against all reasonable evidence? Since it's painfully obvious that the pyramidical societal and legal structures that humanity has allowed to develop over eons are exactly the kind of dominance hierarchies that undoubtedly favor the sociopath and the psychopath. No one would deny that, I think. A human being operating with a normal and healthy cooperative mindset has little inclination to take part in the combat and the dirty business and crimes necessary to climb these kinds of corporate and political ladders. So what exactly do conspiracy deniers imagine that the 70 million or more sociopaths in the world do every day? They're born into a game in which all of the wealth and power of the very biggest kind are at the top of the pyramid, while the most effective attributes for winning in this game are ruthlessness and amorality, if not viciousness and immorality. These are the people that win the game. Have they never played Monopoly? Sociopaths do not choose their worldview consciously. They are simply unable to comprehend why normal people would put themselves at such an incredible disadvantage by limiting themselves with conscientiousness and empathy and honesty and integrity, which are as beyond the understanding of the sociopath as a world without them are to the human beings that inhabit the world. All the sociopath need do to win in the game is lie publicly while conspiring privately. Well, what could be simpler than that? In 2021, to continue to imagine that the world we inhabit is not largely driven by this dynamic amounts to a reckless naivete and immaturity bordering on insanity. Where does such an inadvertently destructive impulse originate from? Well, let me propose a solution. The infant child places an innate trust in those it finds itself with, a trust which is, for the most part, essentially justified. The infant could not survive otherwise. In a sane and healthy society, this deep instinct would evolve as the psyche developed, as self-awareness, the cognitive and reasoning abilities, and skepticism evolved in the individual. This innate trust impulse would continue to be understood as a central need in the psyche. Shared belief systems would conscientiously evolve, and to develop this childish impulse in order to place this faith somewhere consciously, in values and beliefs of lasting meaning and worth to the society, the individual, or ideally to both. Reverence and respect for tradition, natural forces, ancestors, for reason, truth, beauty, liberty, and goodness, the innate value of life, or the initiating spirit of all things, might all be considered valid resting places in which to conscientiously place our trust and faith, as well as those derived from more formalized belief systems, like religion, exactly like the Christian religion. Now, regardless of the path taken to evolve and to develop a personal faith, it is the bringing of one's own consciousness and cognition to this innate impulse that is relevant here. I believe this is a profound responsibility, that is, to develop and cultivate a mature faith, a grown-up faith, which many are understandably unaware of. What occurs when there is a childish need within us, which has never evolved beyond its original survival function of trusting those in our environment who are simply the most powerful, the most present and active, when we have never truly explored our own psyches and deeply interrogated what we truly believe personally and why we believe it, when our motivation for trusting anything or anyone goes unchallenged, when philosophy is left to the philosophers, when we don't go there ourselves. I suggest the answer is simple, and that the evidence of this phenomena and the havoc and danger it is wreaking all around us is this: the innate impulse to trust the mother never evolves, never encounters and engages with its counterbalance of reason, that is, a mature faith, and remains forever on its default infant setting. That, I think, is the reason for otherwise wise people. While the immature psyche no longer depends on its parents for its well-being, the powerful and motivating core tenet I've described remains intact, unchallenged, unconsidered, and undeveloped. And in a world in which stability and security are distant memories, these survival instincts, rather than being well honed, considered relevant, discerning, and up-to-date, remain quite literally those of a baby. Trust is placed in the biggest, loudest, most present, and undeniable force around, because instinct decrees that survival depends on it, just as the infant depended on its mother and on its father. And in this great, quote, world nursery quote, the most omnipresent force is the network of institutions which consistently project an unearned image of power, calm, expertise, concern, and stability. In my view, this is how conspiracy deniers are able to cling to and aggressively defend the utterly illogical fantasy that somehow, above a certain undefined level of the societal hierarchy, corruption, deceit, malevolence, and narcissism mysteriously evaporate. That contrary to the maxim, the more power a person has, the more integrity they will inevitably exhibit. These poor deluded souls essentially believe that where personal experience and prior knowledge cannot fill in the gaps in their worldview, in short, where there is a barred door, Mommy and Daddy are behind it, working out how best to ensure that their little precious will be comfortable, happy, and safe forever. This is the core comforting illusion at the root of the conspiracy denier's mindset. The decrepit foundation upon which they build a towering castle of justification from which to pompously jeer at and mock those who see otherwise, that is, grown-ups who really see. This explains why it is that the conspiracy denier will attack any suggestion that the caregiving archetype is no longer present, that sociopaths are behind the barred door, who hold us in utter contempt and disregard us completely. The conspiracy denier will attack any such suggestion as viciously as if their survival depended on it, which in a way, within the makeup of their unconscious and precarious psyche, it does. Their sense of well-being, of security, of comfort, even of a future at all, is completely unconsciously invested in this fantasy we're describing. The infant has never matured, and because they are not conscious of this, other than as a deep attachment to their personal security, they will fiercely attack any threat to this unconscious and central aspect of their worldview and reality. The tediously common refrain from the conspiracy denier is, "There couldn't be a conspiracy that big." The simple retort to such a self-professed expert on conspiracies is obvious. Well, how big can it be then? Or how small? The biggest medical corporations in the world can go for decades treating the settling of court cases as mere business expenses for crimes ranging from the suppressing of adverse test events to multiple murders resulting from undeclared testing to colossal environmental crimes. Governments perform the vilest and most unthinkable experiments, that is, crimes, on their own people without consequence. Politicians habitually lie to our faces without, again, consequence. And on it goes. At what point exactly does a conspiracy become so big that those people, just couldn't get away with it, and why? I suggest it's at the point where the cognitive ability of the conspiracy denier falters, and their unconscious survival instinct, infancy, kicks in. The point at which the intellect becomes overwhelmed with the scope of events, and the instinct is to settle back into the familiar, comforting faith, known and cultivated since the first moment one's lips found the nipple. The faith that someone else is dealing with it, that where the world becomes unknown to us, a powerful and benevolent human authority exists in which we have only to place our faith unconditionally in order to guarantee emotional security. This is a dangerous delusion, and it may be the central factor placing humanity's physical security and future in the hands of very evil people, sociopaths. To anyone in the habit of dismissing people who are questioning, investigative, and skeptical as tinfoil hat-wearing, paranoid, science-denying Trump supporters, the question is, what do you believe in? Where have you placed your faith, and why have you placed your faith there? How is it that while no one trusts governments, you appear to trust nascent global governance organizations without question? How, may I ask, is that rational? If you are placing faith in such organizations, consider that in the modern global age, these organizations, as extraordinarily well presented as they are on the media, are simply grander manifestations of the local versions we know we can't trust. They are not our parents and demonstrate no loyalty to human values or to us personally. There is no reason to place any faith whatsoever in any of them. So why are you? If you have not consciously developed a faith or question why you believe as you do to some depth, such a position might seem misanthropic, human-hating. But in truth, it is exactly the opposite. These organizations have not earned your trust with anything other than big PR money and glossy lies that they pay for. True power remains as ever, individually, with all of us, and with God. There is a reason why Buddhists strongly advise the placing of one's faith in the Dharma, or the natural law of life, rather than in persons, and that similar refrains are common in other belief systems like Christianity. Power corrupts, we are told, and we know. And in the world today, misplaced and unfounded trust could well be one of the greatest sources of power there is. massive criminal conspiracies exist. The evidence is simply overwhelming. The scope of those currently underway is unknown, but there is no reason to imagine in the new global age that the sociopathic quest for power or the possession of the resources required to move towards it is in any way diminishing. Certainly not while dissent is mocked and censored into silence by gatekeepers, quote, useful idiots, and conspiracy deniers who are in fact directly colluding, whether they know it or not, with the very sociopathic agenda. They do this through their unrelenting attack on those who would shine a light on wrongdoing. It is every human being's urgent responsibility to expose sociopathic agendas wherever they exist, never to attack those who seek to expose them. Now more than ever, it is time to put away childish and immature things and childish impulses, and to stand up as adults and grown-ups to protect the future of the actual children who have no choice but to trust us with their lives. What I have said here has focused on what I consider to be the deepest psychological driver of conspiracy denial. There are certainly other drivers, such as the desire to be accepted, the avoidance of the knowledge of and engagement with, the internal and external shadow, the preservation of a positive and righteous self-image, a generalized version of the, quote, flying monkey phenomena from The Wizard of Oz, in which a self-interested and vicious class protect themselves by coalescing around the bully, in that movie's case, the Wicked Witch of the West. The subtle, unconscious adoption of the sociopathic worldview, outrage addiction, superiority complex, status games, a stunted or unambitious intellect that finds validation through maintaining the status quo, the disassociative protective mechanism of imagining that crimes and horrors committed repeatedly within our lifetime are somehow not happening now, not here and now anyway, and plain old-fashioned laziness and cowardice. These are all reasons. My suggestion is that to some degree all of these build on the foundation of the primary cause outlined here.